Broker Bulletin acknowledges the traditional custodians of all the lands across the country on which we record our podcast and pays its respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Welcome to the Broker Bulletin podcast, where better begins. Join us as we chat with brokers about what's working for them, what drives them, and the real challenges and wins that matter most right now.
Welcome back to the Broker Bulletin podcast. Today we're diving into a topic that so many brokers wrestle with. It's making the leap from being an employee to running their own business. So it's a massive shift, and let's be honest, it's not always easy. But if you get it right, it's rewarding, both financially, personally, huge opportunity. Joining me today for today's podcast is someone who's been through this transition himself quite recently. I'd love to introduce Ledge Home Loans, Jonathan Andela. Jono, so good to see you, mate, and welcome to the podcast. How are you?
G'day, MK. I'm very well, thank you. Pleasure to be with you.
Good to have you here, mate. So let's just jump straight into it. So a couple of questions I want to sort of pick your brain on and for the listeners to help them with. I'm really curious about the mind shift because from an employee, you would have been quite comfortable within the role you're in. But what inspired you to make the move from into being a business owner? And what was the trigger for you to make that shift, Jono?
Yeah, there's probably a few things, MK. Looking back, probably at first a little bit of maybe blind ambition. To be honest, I've always been rather ambitious and then try to figure out the rest from there, But I think making the shift more seriously was, probably a bit of a desire to kind of build something of my own. I think that was always there. And strangely enough, I'm quite creative, I think.
You are not.
Yeah, creative. Who would have thought? No, just having the freedom to kind of create what you want to create, making your own kind of vision.
Yeah.
Taking everyone along for the ride. And probably the main thing there is having a good time whilst doing it. So I've just got that freedom to do everything that I want to do, which is kind of a big one for me jumping into being self-employed. Probably the trigger, to be honest, probably about 13, 14 years in banking. So I've always been around sales and sales leadership and also kind of home loans and client experience. It was probably time to put my money where my mouth is, mate, and go out there and do everything that I kind of preach to my teams on what to do and just bring that to life in my own business.
How long was the decision? You'd have a number of people that would go through a similar journey to you, Jono. Was it a delayed transition or a delayed decision? And what were the initial challenges when you actually did make the decision to actually make the move?
Look, it was probably in my mind for about 6 months to 1 year. I think as it turned out, things were kind of changing in the organization that I work for. I kind of came to a bit of crossroads, and that sounds horrible, but it wasn't horrible. It was just kind of the time to either commit either way to continuing the career in banking and the corporate or to get out there and do my own thing. But in terms of challenges, I don't know if these are probably suggest that these are quite common, but for me, when I reflect, probably the first thing, mate, is probably just breaking some bad habits. And in terms of you're kind of very in your own space as a broker. You're just very sales orientated, very client orientated, but also very set in your ways on how I was doing things. And it worked for me at the time, but very quickly realized that, that wasn't sustainable for the long term. I needed to kind of change certain things, change certain processes for the better of myself, but also kind of the wider business and everyone else that was involved in the business.
Hey, I love that. We always have the conversation when you go to become a business owner, how do you shift from the working in the business to working on the business? So what you were saying as an employee, it was more around the day-to-day. So it was more about in the business, getting in front of clients. Tell me, what was the shift like for you to move into being a business owner, start working on more of a strategic point of view and actually working from sort of a longer-term vision?
Probably just the challenge that you have when you kind of make the shift is there's an immediate lack of capacity, right? Because you go from being, I would imagine, let's say a busy broker, and that's probably why you're thinking about doing your own thing. If you're not a busy broker, you're probably thinking about maybe getting busier or exiting as a broker. So you're a busy broker and then having to do all these other things from a business build perspective, a marketing perspective, compliance, processes and all that kind of stuff. There is that kind of immediate lack of capacity that's pretty apparent. In terms of how you deal with that kind of stuff, we hear a lot about kind of time blocking and perfect weeks. We've spoken about this, mate.
Yeah, plenty of times, eh?
Plenty of times. And it's probably one of the things that is not negotiable.
Do you want to unpack that a bit for me, Jono? That's a real, as a business owner working on the business, that's important. Do you want to unpack what that means?
Absolutely. So if I maybe go back a step, I think when I decided to kind of get into the business, I made a commitment to myself kind of not to sacrifice health, family, or happiness, right? So when we talk about time blocking and perfect weeks, to me, that stuff goes in the diary first and foremost, right? So for instance, daycare drop-offs, I do that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, that goes in the diary immediately. And that's a non-negotiable. Then there's fitness, right? So I've got to be at my best to kind of perform at my best, especially as you get older. Bit more foggy than I was used to if I didn't kind of have the same routine. So that goes in the diary, and the family stuff goes in the diary first and foremost. And then kind of the rest of the week is kind of built around that, mate. So, and then the rest of the week has got to contain obviously you being broker at current. So when I perform my best for those types of meetings, that goes into the diary. And typically that's kind of, like a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's when I like to kind of cram that kind of appointment stuff in there. I try to keep Mondays as free as possible for some business stuff. And then Friday's a bit of a hybrid type day. So I guess finding the right balance and kind of what works for you is really important.
Yeah, I love that. And look, we probably won't unpack it in this session, but what you learn as a business owner about color coding your diary and being very clear on expectations, you end up teaching that to your teams, don't you? So you end up cascading those learnings down to your team. Like, do you find that relevant, or what's your comment
absolutely,
on that?
mate. Yeah, and it's not just that. I think it's everything. I think if it's good enough for me, it's good enough for kind of having some consistency across the business. So, we talk about things, right? Like it may not be like you might have resistance for whatever you're trying to implement in your business. But I think if you focus on, what the issue might be and you're working through that with your team, if they're struggling for capacity, and then it's a perfect way to kind of start, discussing certain tools and sharing what I do. And then a lot of them have kind of taken on that kind of same approach with organizing their weeks.
Yeah, perfect week. Hey, let's go back. So that shift from being, and you sort of shared earlier on, it was a capacity challenge and things like that. When you made that initial shift, what are the non-negotiables? Like, what are the key things brokers should focus on when they go from being an employee to running their own business? Like, what are the most important things over that first to 6, 12 months they should be considering?
The breadth of what you need to handle becomes a lot wider, right? So I think firstly having a business plan. And there's an array of things on there, right? So there's your people, there's your marketing, there's your compliance, there's your financial reporting, there's all these things that you need to tackle. So kind of nail that in your business plan and then make time for all of those parts of the business. And typically in each part of that business or each part of that business plan, you've got key stakeholders, right? So I've got a key marketing person that I'll use. So that just goes in the diary straight away. I've got business partners, that goes in the diary kind of straight away on a monthly basis. We've got our ops stuff and that goes in the diary. So it's kind of just starting with bigger picture, having that vision, having that business plan, and then kind of plugging stuff in and making sure that you've got the people that you need to speak to at the right time and it's in the diary.
And one thing, just to sort of unpack that a bit more, how important is it to surround yourself with the right people? Like when you go from being an employee broker to running your own business, how the way you unpacked it was business planning and sort of really starting to, even financial reporting, making sure you surround yourself with the right people. So how important was that for you as a business owner?
To be honest, I think it's probably the most important thing. So I think that there's a number of things. I think I've learned this a long time ago. You really need to enjoy the people that you spend most of your life with. And a lot of that time it's work, right? Like we speak about the no declared policy and that kind of stuff, and that gets thrown around a lot, but it's very true.
I'm surprised you put up with me, Jono. I'm surprised you put up with me.
Mate, MK in small doses is the way to go. Jokes, mate. I think you've got to really enjoy the company and the people that you work with. I think you certainly need to have similar values, and probably the other thing is you certainly need to be able to work at the same pace. I mean, if you don't work at the same pace with the people that you work with, then that can become very frustrating.
Let's go back a step. For those listening, unpack your business. So in view of the size of the team, like just for optics, and then what I'll get you to do is I'll get you to talk us through what strategies have really worked for you growing the business to where it is today? And what are some of your biggest learnings as well, Jono?
So I guess my journey was a little bit different. I had worked for a brokerage. It's called unpack Finance. So was an employee of that business for a few years, whilst also being kind of self-employed in a JV type structure. So ultimately in October 2023, I bought into the business. So it was quite a substantial business at the time. And obviously we're trying to continue that growth. Essentially, there are two selling principals, myself and Alan. And Alan's been a broker for about 13, 14 years, and myself for about 6 years. In terms of support crew, we've got two onshore people. One of them's a senior and another one's just a client associate. And then we've got two offshore staff as well. In terms of kind of size of business, loan book, circa 450 mil, and obviously planning to grow that.
Unpack for us, like what were the game changers? So if you look back to help the business to get to where it is today, what's been the key strategic moves that you've made as a business owner? And what are some of the learnings, if you had your time again, you wouldn't do?
Yeah, so probably the main thing here is just being very clear on your vision and brand you're wanting to create, and I guess the strategy to achieve that. So for us, the key things were, we carry a lot of really strong relationships as part of the broader network that we have at Ledge and Ledge Home Loans. So we wanted to be authentic. We wanted to continue to serve those, those relationships and those referrers. So that's kind of the key one there. And then probably the other thing is just really understanding kind of what you're really good at. And for us, that niche was very clear for us. It was handling complexities around self-employed clients. A lot of our clients, probably 60 or 70% are kind of self-employed. And we're just really good in that space. So we kind of market to that space and we attract business in that space and we attract new referrers in that space. So just being really kind of clear on that. And the other bits and pieces, mate, around kind of the people, making sure you're upskilling the team and working through kind of really with processes, just kind of always improving your processes and trying to eliminate as much waste as possible and always improving the client experience were a lot of the key things that we were focused on, mate.
Hey, I like that. There was a couple of key things that you sort of unpacked. You shared there around knowing your niche. So a lot of business owners, when they transition from being a broker to being a business owner, they try to do everything. You actually feel identifying your sweet spot and being very clear with educating referrers and customers on what that sweet spot was a real key strategic move for your business moving like in the past?
Absolutely, mate. Spot on. I hear there are obviously lots of varying strategies out there. L&G speak about kind of diversifying income and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not opposed to that. It's just that in our wider business, we really have some experts in that kind of business and asset space. And I'm happy just to let that continue. And then Ledge Home Loans, we just focus on the home loans and we focus on executing certainty for our clients and building trust with referral partners and our clients.
That's really good. So in summary, just before we wrap it up, John, give me two. So if you had your time again, what's the one thing you'd do differently? And what's the outlook for you over the next 6 to 12 months? Like what's the number one or number two priority for you over the next period?
There's probably lots of things I'd do differently, mate, but nothing's really coming to mind at the moment. But probably the couple of things, if I was to have my time over, I think it's probably being prepared to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. And that's a journey, right? Like you get presented with so many new and different things as a business owner. For instance, podcasts like this, somewhat uncomfortable, but starting to feel a little bit more comfortable now, mate, now that it's about to kind of finish.
I might ask more questions, Jono. I might drag it out.
Things like social, right? Like unless you're that extrovert, it's uncomfortable, but you've got strategy and you want to execute and as a business owner, you just got to be put in those situations and you just embrace it and you just go for it. Probably the last thing, mate, is never assume. And what I mean by that is it's very easy to make assumptions that, that's okay, or this is okay, or that process is perfect, or that person's okay. Never assume. So I think always be inquisitive, always be curious, investigate processes, your people, make sure that, everything is kind of aligned and everything is okay and everything is operating at its best, because I think it's those little 1%ers that you can find throughout everything in your business is really what's going to take you to the next level is what I'm finding.
That's really good. For the Broker Bulletin, we're always talking about what's the 1%ers that can make a difference. And you articulated that, but it was all about, it's almost like always challenging yourself to get better. And if I look back at the journey you shared at the start, it was identifying the right time and back yourself and surround yourself with the right people. So, Jono, with your consent, mate, big shout out to you, mate. Thank you so much for making your time to join the Broker Bulletin, and it's been great to catch up with you as always. Thanks, Jono.
Thanks, MK. Appreciate it, mate.
Thanks for tuning in to Broker Bulletin. We would hate for you to miss an episode. Subscribe to Broker Bulletin in your favourite podcast app. Has this episode been helpful? We'd love you to rate and review us. It'll help us deliver content that's useful to you and help others discover us. If you have great ideas for topics worth tackling or have burning questions you'd like addressed on an upcoming episode, reach out. Links in the show notes. See you next time.